Morning. Thanks so much for having me. It's lovely to be here with you all. I'm really glad to be here chatting to you all about the importance of nutrition in the context of the fertility journey. My name is Sonia. I am a Canadian registered dietitian. First 1,000 days, which is pre-pregnancy, so the fertility window about a month before you conceive, all of pregnancy, and then all of infancy, so until children are about 2 years old. This is a really critical time, or a really critical window, where we're basically laying the foundations for lifelong health. And a lot of this is impacted by our lifestyle and our diet, and it's a really incredible time to make sure you're giving your little one their best possible start to life. When we're creating a new life, we want to give it the best possible chance and the best possible building blocks available, and so focusing on our health and nutrition during this time really helps us to do that. So for the purposes of today, we'll chat about fertility, but keep that first 1,000 days in mind. You'll see it now that I've mentioned it. It'll be like a word you've now learnt, and you'll see it out there. Even the libraries has a first 1,000 days reading program. So keep your ear and eye out for that, but it's a really important concept that we're learning more about. But the first 1,000 days, I think you'll notice now that you've been flagged to it. So I'm sure we're all very familiar with some of the lifestyle factors that are related to fertility, and there are some lifestyle factors that exacerbate infertility, meaning that it makes infertility more prevalent. So these include stress, suboptimal diet, and obesity. And I always like to try and encourage individuals that so much of the fertility journey is largely out of our control, and that can be really disheartening and really frustrating. But there are some things, like these lifestyle factors, that are modifiable, meaning we can have some sort of impact and we can have a little bit of control over them. And so this is a really helpful place to put your focus, because it's something that you can do in a journey that can feel a little bit out of your control. So today we're going to talk mostly about diet, but keep those other two in mind because they are, again, the modifiable factors of fertility. So again, just a little bit of research. This was a study done on women, and basically they found that 5 dietary shifts increased or improved their fertility by 69%. So I'll bounce through them quickly, but first one is ensuring adequate folate. This is something I'm sure many of you have heard of. Folic acid is another word for folate, and this is a really important nutrient, specifically in the first trimester. So ensuring that you're not deficient in this nutrient pre-conception is really important. We all have different requirements for folate, depending on our gender, our weight, our age, our medical conditions. For example, if you're struggling with Crohn's disease, your requirements are higher. If you're obese or you're overweight, your requirements are higher. So ensuring that you're getting the amount of folate that your body needs is really important. The next one is reducing insulin levels. So this makes sense. Insulin is a hormone in our body. Our hormones all sort of work in symphony, and by managing our insulin levels in our body through what we put into our bodies, so specifically low GI foods. GI stands for glycemic index. I won't dive into that now. It's a bit of a deep topic for today, but it's the idea that the quality and quantity of the carbohydrates that we put into our body impacts our hormone called insulin, which goes on to impact the rest of how our body functions. Plant-based proteins also were seen to be really beneficial in the fertility space, so meaning including more sources of beans and legumes and lentils rather than so many sources of dairy and saturated fats like animal proteins that as a South African population we eat quite a lot of. It's a really wonderful thing to actually bring in some plant proteins as well. There's a lot of reasons for this that I won't dive into, but just feel good about your meat-free Mondays if that's something that you do already. The other factor that really improved fertility was the types and the ratio of dietary fats that we're having. So again, broad picture, there's different types of fats that we consume, and some of them are really beneficial for us. Some of them our body needs, but not in such large quantities. So having the right balance of healthy fats, so for example, omega-3 fatty acids are great for our bodies and great for fertility, but decreasing the amounts of trans fats or saturated fats. So making sure we're having the right amount of and the right types of fat in our diet's really, really helpful. And then finally, this one was quite surprising to researchers, but drinking full fat cow's milk was seen as a fertility enhancing or positive food to have in the context of trying to conceive. So a bit of research on ladies, but I would be amiss to not bring up the concept of male fertility and dietary patterns, because as I'm sure we're all very aware, it takes two to tango. A perfect embryo is made from two cells, a sperm cell and an egg cell, and both the health of each are really important in terms of the health of the embryo that is produced. So what we're seeing is there are quite a few things that also impact male infertility. So what I mean by that is the dietary intake is either impacting their sperm parameters, so they're having abnormal sperm parameters, or hormone levels. And the biggest ones that I would probably want to focus on for men is the dietary fat that I was chatting about. That's quite important that men are really careful about that. So it's quite hard to see on this figure, but thank you. The high intake of total fat and saturated fat, so that contributes to infertility. And if you have a low intake of polyunsaturated fat, so I was talking a little bit earlier about omega-3s, those typically come from your fatty fish, that also contributes to male infertility. And then low consumption of low-fat dairy. So fat kind of comes up in a few different ways. It's really important. The other thing that I always like to highlight with any male clients that I work with is low intakes of antioxidants. So I did my master's research on the effects of diet on something called chronic low-grade inflammation. So what we're putting in our body that is affecting the levels of inflammation that we have in our body. And much of the time this goes unnoticed. It's not something that necessarily presents in a symptom right away or presents in a disease state right away, but our bodies are, arguably a lot of us are struggling with a little bit of inflammation, and our diet really contributes to that. So what we put into our bodies will really help to balance it. I'm going to bring up again partners' preconception health. I'm really glad to see some partners, some male partners in the audience. It's always really nice to see the male partner on board. I feel like the onus is so often put on the female partner, and actually we really, really need both of the pair to be part of the journey. So I'm really glad to see you guys here. And then very briefly talk about endocrine disrupting chemicals. The first thing is to make sure that any of your existing health conditions are well managed before trying to conceive. So things like overweight, underweight, anemia. So if you're iron deficient, this is something we can correct for, which will really, really help your body's health and ultimately your fertility. Celiac disease is, if it's undiagnosed or unmanaged, contributes to those levels of inflammation in your body that I was talking about. Things like diabetes, PCOS, these are all different conditions that can be assisted with lifestyle and diet, and are something that is a really, really good thing to have managed either on your journey or before you begin your journey. And lifestyle tweaks, I always suggest to be on a prenatal multivitamin, ideally at least 3 months before trying to conceive, but keep in mind all prenatal multis are a little bit different, and there's no one that's perfect for everyone, depending on your lifestyle and your dietary preferences. So for example, if you're vegan, if you do or don't eat fish, if you consume any dairy products, all these different supplements have different amounts of these nutrients in them, and we need to make sure we match it to a prenatal multivitamin that actually is giving your body what it needs, and not too much of one thing and then missing something else entirely. Being physically active, also going back to the story of inflammation in our body, really, really helps to keep us healthy and improve a lot of different health outcomes. Soft drinks are many dietitians' bane of practice, especially now because we have a lot of diet soft drinks as well. So we've learned in our understanding that sugar isn't a positive thing to have too much of, and we're now replacing it with these diet or low calorie or low sugar options, and they unfortunately aren't the answer either. So it's really important that you limit those. And then the third point is choosing a variety of foods. Again, as I mentioned before, there's no one perfect food. You can't survive on avocados, quinoa, salmon, and a supplement. It's not going to give your body what it needs. So making sure you have a really diverse diet and you're hitting all the different food groups is really quite important in terms of making sure your body has what it needs. So for fertility-friendly options at home, iodidated table salt. This is something that is widely available all over the world. It's basically based on research. We saw that iodine deficiency was an issue, and so they've now fortified table salt with iodine. And iodine is an important nutrient, again, very much so in the first trimester, but also in the preconception period, as ideally you go into pregnancy nutrition or sort of nutrient replete, meaning you're not deficient in anything. Extra virgin olive oil has a beautiful fat profile, so if you can, choose that for your cooking oil at home. Low mercury fish, really, really beneficial, as opposed to high mercury fish. And then reducing sources of saturated fat. So this is things like animal fat or chicken skin. You want to be a little bit mindful of how much saturated fat you're having. Particularly fertility-friendly foods include omega-3 rich fish, eggs. This is because it's got a nutrient called choline in it. Has anyone heard of choline before? So eggs are really rich in a nutrient called choline. It's my feeling is it's like the next folic acid, and it's something that's going to be included in all prenatal supplements very soon. It is overseas already, but eggs are a fabulous source of it, so it's a great thing to include, and it's really important for baby's neurodevelopment, so that first trimester. But whenever I talk about first trimester, you can kind of automatically think preconception as well, because ideally, before you fall pregnant, you want to make sure that your body has everything it needs. My real feeling is that our body is made to absorb real foods, and we absorb that a little bit better than we do a supplemental form. The supplemental form's almost like a great insurance policy, a great backup, or a great fills the gap. But ideally, we're looking to get these things from our diet where we can. And then finally, I always like to mention I'm part of a group called the Early Life Nutrition Alliance. We're a international group of pregnancy, fertility, and postpartum dietitians. And we actually have a journal club. So if you're really interested in the research behind how nutrition can impact fertility and pregnancy, head to the website and sign up for the free journal club. Basically, every week we send a synopsis of 3 most recent research articles that summarize what we're seeing in the research at the moment.